Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome to the Film Brits podcast. I'm your host Trilbee, the John McClane of film criticism, and to be right up front, if you do not like politics in your podcasts or in your entertainment or in your media or whatever, well, firstly, you shouldn't be watching, reading or consuming anything of any kind, but if you are particularly adverse to political opinions or opinions that you personally disagree with, because let's be honest, if anyone's going to have an issue with anything, it will be the latter, not the former, then there are timestamps in the description below where you can skip the first main topic of this podcast and you can go on to other things like the MCU or other things like the lightning round questions that I'll be doing later, which I do not know what I'm going to be asked. Hopefully they will be fun, but as for the main topic, I'm going to skip straight into the main topic as opposed to starting with the share the love segment. This is going to be this topic was requested by one of my patrons, and I thought it was such an interesting topic that I would make it the main one of the episode. So Edward Sweet asks, if you were asked to manage a film about the Trump administration, who would you get as director, who would you cast in which roles, and what would you include? I imagine you would make it a farcical dark comedy in the vein of The Big Short, but I'd like to hear you go into more detail. That was such an interesting question that I thought I would make it the main topic of the podcast, and if you'd like to skip any of that, if you are a Donald Trump fan or Donald Trump supporter, which to be completely upfront, I am not a Donald Trump supporter in any way, shape or form. I actually find him as a person, him as a businessman, and him as a politician completely repugnant. So if you do not like contrary opinions to your own in regards to Donald Trump, then you may want to skip this topic. But the approach that I've taken with this question is that you say, if you were to manage to film out the Trump administration, who do you get as director, who do you cast, and what would you include? You are completely right in that if I had to boil it down into one project, then I'd make it a dark comedy in the vein of The Big Short, which for those of you who've not seen it was a incredible Oscar-nominated biopic about the financial collapse in the late noughties, and it had an incredible cast of talent. You had Christian Bale, you had Steve Carell, who should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but it was Christian Bale who was. You've got Brad Pitt, you've got Ryan Gosling. It's an incredible cast, it's an incredible script, and I think while it may not be the best movie of that particular year to be nominated for Best Picture, I think it was the most important movie. It was such a incredibly biting and a really, really well-made piece of filmmaking, of political and financial commentary. The Big Short is an outstanding movie, and Adam McKay, who is basically known for like the Anchorman films and Step Brothers, he comes out of nowhere and does this incredibly dark but really funny, like darkly funny movie about the financial collapse, and he doesn't mince words. He addresses it with this seriousness that a topic like that demands, but he still makes it really accessible. Like there are moments where Margot Robbie just appears in a bubble bath to explain what credit loans are, but it still makes it really accessible and funny and endearing, and he would absolutely be my pick to do a movie like this. But for this topic, and in order to stretch that out into a main topic as opposed to just a 3 or 4 minute response that I would normally give to my patrons, this is going to be a main topic. And what I think, if you are going to do a Trump movie, there are 3 approaches you can take, and yes, I'm essentially pitching 3 movies, but I'm not going to skimp you here. I am going to give 3 different directors for each project, and Alec Baldwin will be cast as Trump in all of them, because his impression may be comical, but it's obscenely accurate as well. I think he would be the best pick to play Donald Trump. And as for the supporting cast, I may throw out a couple of suggestions here and there, but I would pitch 3 projects, and these pitches I should say that I'm going to do could completely change if Trump stays on for another term, or if he gets impeached, or if he resigns early. Whatever the outcome could be, heck, if this week is any indication, he could actually be out of the White House by the time I've finished this friggin' podcast. But this story could completely change. The approach you take to a Trump movie likely will completely change based on how this administration ends and what happens to Trump afterwards. Whether or not he does resign, or whether or not he finishes his term, or he's voted out in the next election, or if he's impeached, we don't know what the ending of this story is. So I'm just talking about more of a setup, more of a premise, but we don't really have an ending for this movie yet, with the exception of one of the pitches, because there's only one way a pitch like that possibly could end, but I'll get to that later. For the first one, I would have Stephen Frears, the director of The Queen, Philomena and Florence Foster Jenkins tackle a movie which is essentially a comedic biopic about Donald Trump, because you'd get Stephen Frears is kind of known for doing these sort of optimistic, Oscar baity, pie in the sky, really feel good biopics, which also have a really great emotional core to them. Philomena, which is the story of Philomena Lee, who was a young girl who was trying to find her son, because she was raised in a nunnery, and she was a teenage mother, and the nuns gave her her son away, and she tried to find him when she was like in her 60s or 70s. It's a really great true story. I've read the book that the film is based off of, The Lost Child of Philomena Lee by Martin Sixsmith, who was a BBC journalist, and in the film he was played by Steve Coogan. Philomena is a terrific movie. In my 2013 Trilbee Awards, I gave Judi Dench the award for Best Lead Actress. I think she gave the best performance of that year for her role in that film. And he's also done Florence Foster Jenkins, which was, it kind of gave a much more optimistic and much more positive spin to the life of Florence Foster Jenkins, played by Meryl Streep, who was also nominated for Best Actress. Stephen Frears has got a very good track record in getting his leading cast members, leading female cast members, nominated or potentially even winning for Oscars, because Helen Mirren played the Queen in 2006 as the Queen and won Best Actress that year. So you're probably not going to be getting many women in this movie, basically due to the source material, more or less, but it'll be interesting to see what Stephen Frears could do with a inspirational kind of Donald Trump biopic, because no matter what you do for a Donald Trump movie, it is going to be unorthodox, because he is a very unorthodox man, and I mean that in both positive and negative ways. I'm going to try and be balanced as possible to not completely alienate my remaining listenership. And if you're thinking, why are you trying to do such a controversial topic? I wanted to talk about My Hero Academia in the last podcast. Not many people listened to it. Let's try and get the listeners in. It's your fault, folks. I'm partially kidding, but every joke does have a basis in reality. So you have an unorthodox figure. So as a result, you kind of need an unorthodox biopic. So Trilbee, why would you have someone like Stephen Frears do a inspirational kind of like biopic for Donald Trump? Because his life is kind of filled with failure. Like like Donald Trump did not have the love of his dad. Absolutely not. He's not the type of person where you could make a traditionally inspirational story where he rose from nothing to become president of the United States. No, he had like a multi-million-dollar loan from his dad, which he subsequently lost. He was basically a failed real estate agent, and he only really got by like the numerous times he went into bankruptcy because his dad and his and the banks paid him out. And he was saved from bankruptcy, and he had so many bank loans from so many different places that he essentially was able to succeed because he was in so much debt he couldn't possibly fail, because the banks needed those loans back. The banks needed that money back, so they couldn't make him they couldn't make him bankrupt, because he owed, and he had borrowed so much from so many different places that it was kind of impossible for him to fail. It's such an unorthodox success story where he failed upwards, which essentially is the American dream. And he had the failed, was it Atlanta? It was the failed casino business where he tried to create the biggest casino in the country, or at least in the state, one of the biggest casinos in the country. And casino, the gambling business, is essentially a business where people just hand you over money. It is very difficult, relatively speaking, because all business in a way is difficult, but it's relatively difficult to fail at gambling when people just give you money. But Donald Trump did manage to find a way to fail, and he once again was bailed out by his dad, who never ever loved him. So you're kind of dealing with a similar I, Tonya situation there. Hey, maybe Alison Janney could play Donald Trump Sr. That would be a fun bit of casting. Also, Melissa McCarthy should play Sean Spicer in all the versions. And I know I'm just going with the SNL cast members, but when their impressions are so on point and so biting and so accurate, it's kind of difficult to imagine anyone else. But then you have someone who, in the, was it the late 90s, '90s and the 2000s, where he was essentially a failed businessman, but he was able to keep himself in the public eye by appearing on Fox News and appearing on news programs, and also he was in the Celebrity Apprentice, and he was on The Apprentice, where he was able to build up this persona of winning despite him being one of business's biggest failures, and he was able to use that notoriety to get himself into the White House and into politics. And he would lie, and he would cheat, and he would treat everybody around him terribly, and he has no idea what he's doing, and he's possibly completely mentally incompetent, yet he's still succeeding. And I think that is where Stephen Frears would be able to come in, because we've seen him do darker material before as well. The program, which came out in 2015, nobody saw it. It was a massive box office flop, but it's a Lance Armstrong biopic with Ben Foster as Lance Armstrong and Chris O'Dowd as David Walsh, who was the journalist who kind of outed the doping scandal in his book Seven Deadly Sins. And it's an incredibly good film. Ben Foster's terrific in it, and Jesse Plemons he plays Floyd Landis. There's a really good cast. Dustin Hoffman is Bob Hammond. It's a great story, and it shows that Stephen Frears, despite him kind of being known for these more inspirational biopics, is able to do darker material. And it's because of that balance where I think you market this film. I don't have a title for it, but you market this Trump biopic as kind of an inspirational American dream story, but he succeeds through his countless list of failures. He's declared bankruptcy 6 times. He knows nothing about politics or economics or basically anything socially outside of his inner circle of people. He's surrounds himself with yes men, yet he's still able to succeed. And if you were to do a subversive kind of biopic where there are inspirational shots of Trump looking up into the sunset with a whimsical look on his face, and it's kind of the movie I imagined The Theory of Everything would be, because I love The Theory of Everything. It was one of my favourite biopics in recent memory, and also rest in peace Stephen Hawking, you brilliant man. But when I saw those trailers, and there was the shot of Eddie Redmayne and Felicity Jones on the merry-go-round and dancing in the grass, and I thought this was going to be just a terrible biopic, but it was really cutting. It was really, really well done. It's a subversive love story. That's kind of the marketing I would take, where people would think they were getting this really inspirational movie about someone who rose up from nothing, but then watching it you realise that all these conventions are being subverted. This is not someone who rose from nothing. This is someone who was born with a gold spoon in his mouth and proceeded to decorate everything he had with gold. It's someone who doesn't know anything about anything, but was literally too dumb and too big to fail. And that's the approach I would take for the Donald Trump pitch number 1. You would get Stephen Frears with Alec Baldwin to do a pseudo-inspirational, subversive biopic about his life. Depending on what happens with the rest of Trump's life, he's in his early 70s, correct? So depending on what he does with the rest of his administration, depending on what he does with his post-politics career, if he does have one, that would dictate kind of the ending of the movie and what tone and what directions it would go in. But that's kind of approach number 1. Approach number 1 is that you focus on Donald Trump himself, from his life story to also his political power, and him becoming the Republican nominee and ultimately winning the presidency. And you'd focus on moments like the Hollywood Access bus and everything like that. But you sort of frame it as someone who is succeeding in the American dream. That is approach number 1. Approach number 2 is you go for a much more impersonal Donald Trump story. You'd go for someone who was maybe one of his supporters, and there's the narrative that is completely not true. The numbers and the statistics, the facts just do not back this up, where Donald Trump was propelled to the presidency by the forgotten people, by people who were poor, who just were not listened to. Well, that is part of the story, but people have it as the liberal elites, and they really expect they were the ones who voted for Hillary, and it was the forgotten, downtrodden people who wanted change who voted for Trump, when the figures actually suggest that it was kind of a much broader mixture of people. It was predominantly white men and white women who propelled him to the presidency. It was the lower and middle class and upper class voters. It was kind of a very broad spectrum. The majority of people who did not vote for Trump were people with postgraduate degrees, with college educations, smarter people basically, and also people, also women of colour and men of colour. Even white women, they predominantly voted for Trump. which is kind of like in a way Turkey's voting for Christmas. But what is it? But what is what is. But what I will say is that while I don't want to completely endorse this narrative that there is like this sort of silent majority of people who are not racist, who are not sexist, who are not bigoted, they just feel forgotten and they want change. And I think that is kind of an approach you could take, where Donald Trump is sort of like this mythic figure in their life and they want change. They are someone who could possibly work in a coal industry or could work in an industrial industry, and they are seeing change. But once again, you are playing with maybe a subversive angle on it. You are with someone who who watches Fox News, or maybe is subscribed to the Alex Jones InfoWars podcast or something, or reads Breitbart, or hears all of these stories from people on Facebook and everything about indoctrination and about Muslims and about brown people and like white genocide and all that. And he's not this main person who would kind of like be an amalgamation of all the demographics who voted for Trump. Like, you maybe do have a working class person who is white, who does not have a college education, who is and you follow this person and you kind of use this film to get into the mindset of why that person would do something like this. And also, how would you communicate with a person like that? How would you communicate with someone whose facts are not on their side in any way, shape or form, but they have such ingrained biases that they are willing to vote for someone like Donald Trump, despite the absolutely clear track record that it would not go well. This is the story where I think you do have kind of a definitive ending, where you have someone who isn't exactly the person who wants to build a wall or have a Muslim ban or who endorses grabbing women by the pussy, but you have somebody who does want change, who is kind of sick of the establishment and is willing to vote for Trump. And maybe he goes to one of these rallies and he just sees these people and he's like, what the hell am I in for? Is this who I'm associated with? But I'm not one of them. I think that's kind of a very interesting take to the material. But there is only one way that this story can end. You vote for someone like Trump because you want to see the swamp drained. You want to see America run like one of Trump's businesses because you think that's a good thing. Because you think that's a good thing, even though he's gone into bankruptcy 6 times and he is basically a notoriously failed and terrible businessman. So why would you want the country to be run like one of his businesses? The only way this type of story can end, because this is how it is going to end, I can say this with complete certainty, is that they are going to realize that they were conned, that they were tricked, that things are not going to change, that Trump is part of the establishment, that he is only there for the shareholders and for the donors, and he's not there for the quote-unquote forgotten red states. He's not there for you. He's there for whoever is going to line his pockets the most, whether it's the NRA or big oil businesses and things like that. He is not for the common person. He does not give a single solitary family-friendly fuck about any of you unless you are willing to vote for him. And that is kind of the ending that this type of movie needs. Who would I have to direct it? Jay Roach, and he's a very political filmmaker. He has done, for example, he directed Meet the Fockers and Meet the Parents and Dinner for Schmucks, but his work has taken on a much more political bent. You've got The Campaign, which it's not a great comedy, but it was in the 2012 election year. It was about this local presidency, this local Congress position, and it starred Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, and these two people like having this campaign competition. It was a decent premise, but I don't think it went as far as it could have done, although the baby scene is legitimately funny. But he also recently directed Trumbo. And this is kind of the approach I might take with a film like this, where you do have this guy. Let's say he's played by Ron Perlman, and I'm not saying that Ron Perlman endorses Trump. He absolutely does not. If you look on his Twitter feed, but I think because of his outspoken opinion towards the president, he may be willing to be in a movie like this. And Trumbo is this man who is the head of this household, but he's a really difficult figure to have living under that roof. He's got a daughter who wants to go to protest African American civil rights and is much more who is getting politically involved. And I think if you made a film like this, you would have this Ron Perlman father figure who is very outspoken and wants to vote for Trump and wants to see change. But you have maybe a liberal daughter who is it's going to be her very first election and she's going to be voting for Hillary. Or maybe you may have a wife figure in the house. Let's say, just for fun and go for the Trumbo comparison, she's played by Diane Lane, and she is initially a Trump supporter, and then then she hears the Access Hollywood bus tape, and she kind of comes to her senses, and midway through decides to vote for Clinton, or maybe a third party vote, and you have this split household. A house divided is what you could potentially call this film. I think that's not a bad title. And I've not seen the film yet because it has yet to receive a UK release date, but Jay Roach was a producer on the film Mark Felt, The Man Who Brought Down the White House, which is Liam Neeson stars as Mark Felt, who is an FBI agent who becomes the deep throat whistleblower who exposed the Watergate scandal in the Clinton administration. And like Jay Roach, like I said, is a very political filmmaker, and with Trumbo he is able to get across a family dynamic like with the political edge and political leanings, and I think Jay Roach would be a good approach for this sort of thing. And also with like Meet the Parents and Meet the Fockers, even though I don't think those are great movies, he does have he's good with large casts and family dynamics and family units and making it feel quite human. I actually remember treating Meet the Fockers the same way I treated the UK Office, where I would watch it and I wasn't laughing, I didn't find it funny, but I was still enjoying what I was watching because I liked the performances, I liked the dynamic of the cast members. So that could be something that could be applied to this House Divided film. Because, like I said, there's only one way this type of film can end, but of course it will depend on what happens later on down the line, and also just whether or not, like, you have such a politically divided time, and you kind of use these characters as a sort of cipher to get across the divided political leanings. Maybe you could have this father figure's daughter go to an Antifa rally, and like she punches a Nazi, and he's kind of trying to argue a false equivalency in regards to like defending the white supremacists and stuff like that. Like I said, these are complex and difficult times, so this would be, out of the three, probably the most difficult one to do, because you also don't want it to be massively exposition heavy, but I think it's an interesting approach to take, that you use this family dynamic to sort of have your finger on the pulse of what many Americans were feeling at the time. And you also, when making this film, you don't necessarily want to legitimize or maybe even sympathize with your average Trump voter in a way, but you also want to kind of understand the mindset behind it, and you also need to make a very important distinction between a perceived what's the term, a perceived discrimination or perceived marginalization versus actual discrimination and actual marginalization. Like you don't want to endorse the whole, oh, conservatives are an oppressed class, or like, what on earth are you on about? You're friggin' in power. But like that's the sort of dynamic you've got to play with. Like, you don't want to legitimize it, but you've kind of got to bring it out into the open and make this discussion happen. And that would be an approach I take for the second pitch. Now the third pitch is kind of a amalgamation between the two, where you do have this Trump story and also this Trump supporter story, but this would essentially be a loose adaptation of Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury book. Now, just to know, I've not read the book yet. It's like £20. When I last checked, it was like £20. I think it's actually maybe gone down in price now. But I'm kind of waiting for the cheaper paperback version before I give it a read. But it would be set in the White House during that time, and Donald Trump is more of a supporting player. And the main actor, the main character, could be this composite character between several Republican congressmen or people, or someone who's part of Trump's administration who somehow does not get fired. That might be the most unrealistic part of the movie, where you would have someone in Trump's support cabinet, or so, like his support circle, and he does not get fired. But this whole situation is kind of unbelievable, so you got to have some sort of suspension of disbelief here. So you would have someone who is witnessing all of this from inside the White House, and you would kind of go for a more comedic Big Short. This is the project I would have Adam McKay direct. This is where you would have like a massive cast of big name celebrities playing these people inside of Trump's administration who are part of the Republican Party, who kind of, half of them are completely supportive of Trump, and maybe the other half are kind of opportunist politicians who know that what they're doing is wrong, but it's benefiting them. They are essentially yes men. They have kind of no moral fibre or any sort of spine or backbone. They are opportunist career politicians who know that everything is wrong and this is not normal and that they should not morally be supporting this, but they're doing it anyway because there's too much short-term game to be had. And this is probably going to be the film that is most influenced by what happens after the administration, whether or not they are arrested or whether or not they do get voted out. It's like one great thing you've seen from the Florida Parkland shooting, and that's the worst sentence ever, but like these people who are survivors of the shooting, they are people who know who are receiving NRA donations, who know who are lying through their teeth, and they're able to say, no, these people, they work for us, we don't work for them, we can vote them out if we want to. And that's why this like millennial generation is the smartest and most well-informed generation yet. And that the next generation, like Generation Z, I think they're calling it, and then the generation after that, they're going to be smarter and more informed and more well-educated than myself and millennials and the generation before. That's just how it goes. But this is maybe the first generation. Was like Columbine, they were like toddlers when Columbine happened. They've kind of known nothing except these school shootings. And you have you have a generation that has grown up with smartphones, which I don't say in a derogatory way. They have grown up in a world where access to the information superhighway and like public records and facts and all the evidence is on their phones. Like they're able to, a politician says something of note. Okay, are they telling the truth? They can immediately Google it and immediately call that out. And it's going to be interesting to see what the next, like, I firmly do believe because of that, when the millennials grow up and when the next generation become like eligible to vote, that the blue wave is coming. And I'm not saying that because it's sort of like, it's kind of what I want to see happen. I think it's just the logical step, because you're sort of seeing maybe this last gasp of the facts, where you do see like Donald Trump say Mexicans, they're bringing the crime, they're bringing rapists, and they're bringing their worst and all these things. And if you just look at the crime statistics, you know that is absolutely just not the case, because when you immigrate to a country illegally or illegally, you are more likely to keep your head down and not arouse suspicion. You are infinitely less likely to commit crime. This is not only common sense, but the facts support this reasoning. And you have this new generation of people who are able to easily access those facts. This was a massive tangent, but you would have this, like, the film would massively be influenced by what happens at the end, whether or not Trump does survive his term or go on to another 4 years, or whether or not we get destroyed in nuclear annihilation, in which case the film does not get made, obviously, or whether or not he gets impeached. And if you maybe could have a Mark Felt, the man who brought down the White House, you maybe have one of those films, who knows, but you would maybe have a dark comedy about these opportunist politicians who know that they are part of this ridiculous administration, but they are going along with it anyway because the short-term benefits are too great for them. It would be basically the malest and the whitest cast ever. With the exception of you get your Kellyanne Conway or your Betsy DeVos, but yeah, this would be maybe one of the more interesting ones to go for. But those are my 3 pitches. So just to recap, pitch number 1 is a Stephen Frears subversive, pseudo-optimistic biopic about the life of Donald J. Trump. You have A House Divided, directed by Jay Roach, which is a family drama about a politically divided family who are going through the presidential election. What the dad votes for Trump and the mother votes for maybe a third party, or for a Democrat, and the daughter votes for a Democrat. And you also have this pseudo-dark comedy, this farcical look into the fire and fury Michael Wolff White House, directed by Adam McKay. And I may completely regret asking this question, but in the comment section below, let me know what your ideal Trump movie would be, whether or not you would go for a biopic or if you'd go for something completely different. Please let me know in the most civilist terms, most civilist way possible. That would be greatly appreciated. I've at least tried to, emphasis on tried, be relatively restrained and try and be... I'm not going to say the word balanced, more like factually accurate, because I think balance, like, oh, you've got someone who denies climate change debating Bill Nye, well, then you kind of legitimize climate change denial. No, balance is not an obligation, and sometimes there is a time and a place for balance. There's never a time and a place for truth. So that's the approach I'm going to go for, just for the truth. And also for Edward Sweet on Patreon, thank you very much for the topic. And if you would like to request a main topic or a main subject of conversation, or maybe a question you just quickly want answered, then please consider becoming a patron. www.patreon.com/Trilbee, and you can see all the information there. It helps to keep the lights on here at Trilbee Reviews. And also, you get to get early access to the podcast, get early access to my video reviews, and you also get your name in the credits of my upcoming short horror film. The date has been set for the final day of filming. Then once that is done, we're going completely into post-production, and I really cannot wait for that. But anyway, Edward Sweet also said that he posted a comment with some underrated movie recommendations, so I'll just give them a shout out. Cheap Thrills from 2013, director E.L. Katz, a dark comedy about a struggling family man and his old friend who bump into an obscenely wealthy couple at a bar and end up embroiled in an increasingly twisted game of dares. A thrilling, thought-provoking, nasty piece of work, and I loved it. And his next one is one I have seen, You're Next, 2012, directed by Adam Wingard, a horror thriller about a family reunion that goes disastrously wrong when a gang of masked assailants start killing the family off one by one, leaving the people trapped inside to fend off the invaders with Home Alone-style traps and cobbled together weapons, all the while not knowing who to trust. Unpredictable plot, well-written characters, excellent scene geography, terrific gore effects and creative kills, not for the faint of heart. I have seen You're Next. Myself and like 3 or 4 friends caught it on Netflix one night, and I was not that impressed, to be honest. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a decent horror slasher. But about 10 minutes into the film, my then girlfriend, now fiance, looked at one of the main characters, I won't say who it is, looked at one of the main characters and said, I bet he does it. And then he did it. She was able to completely predict that almost an hour and a half before it was actually revealed. But I thought it was creative. I liked the lead. I can't remember who played her, but I liked the lead character, or like the final girl, quote unquote. And I thought it was competently well made. But anyway, we do also have a question from another patron, Dean Jones, hashtag Dean Jones for next Bond, hashtag Dean Jones for next Doctor. Dean Jones can just do anything he wants to. So Dean Jones asks, with the release of Avengers Infinity War getting closer, what do you want to see from the MCU post-Phase 3? Also, have you ever been to a midnight release of a movie, game, etc.? If so, how was your experience? I ask because Infinity War will be my first ever midnight screening. So, for the first bit, I have been to midnight screenings before. The last one I went to, I believe, was Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, because I knew that was going to be... it was something to do with my work schedule at the time, where I knew I had to catch a midnight screening, otherwise I wouldn't be able to see it, and I wouldn't be able to review it and talk about it. I think what I did was that I saw the film, and then I almost immediately went to my friend's house to record an episode of the Movie Mania podcast. I think that's what happened. Either way, I ended up recording Movie Mania podcast like at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. I don't know if those two events are linked or whether or not I immediately went to see it, but either way, the midnight screening for that, it was a full screening, it was a really good crowd, but when leaving the film, I just got this really, this sense that everyone in that theatre left disappointed. There was no enthusiasm or nerdy chatter or anything that you normally get when leaving a screening. People just kind of seemed really deflated by the end of the movie, and not because it's a necessarily sad ending, but because, with Superman and everything, it just felt like, oh, you just spent 2.5 hours in this screening, and I saw this thing, I was one of the first people in the country to see it at midnight, and it really, really let me down. That was kind of the sense I got from the screening, and maybe that could have been projection, I don't know, but I also went to see, I can't remember if it was a midnight screening or just a really late night screening. I can't remember which. I saw Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. It was either Breaking Dawn Part 1 or Part 2. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, it was because I had to watch the film and then immediately review it for the student paper, because there was a printing deadline for it and they wanted to get the review, so I had to see it opening night at a midnight screening. So I was surrounded by the most devoted of fans, and the fans applauded at the end and they cheered whenever Jacob took his shirt off, etc, etc. So both of my midnight screenings have been pretty negative, because both of the films I saw were films that I did not really want to see in a midnight screening environment, but was obligated to, and also the films were not particularly good in my opinion. But I think midnight screenings are awesome if you have the right film and the right crowd. I imagine a Marvel Infinity War film would be a great midnight screening. No, there was a third film. I saw Captain America: The Winter Soldier at a midnight screening, and once again it was because I had to do a review the next day for Keys TV News, the student TV network, and I was doing the reviews for it. And they recorded on a Friday, like late morning, early afternoon. So I had to see Captain America: The Winter Soldier on Thursday night at like Friday morning, midnight. And then I watched it, I went home, got about 6 hours sleep, and then went into the studio to record the review. So yeah, Captain America: The Winter Soldier was probably my best experience at a midnight screening, but there were only like 10 people in the screening, and 2 of those people were people who were like, oh, we want to see the film, we'll come with you, Trilbee, because we're also with like Keys News, we just want to see the film and see if it's any good. So yeah, I've been to see 3 midnight screenings. The Winter Soldier one was the best, but probably it was the best because it was the better film. But ironically speaking, it was probably the least midnight screening environment that you want, because there were only like 10 people there, and it wasn't like a great geeky, awesome, fun vibe, which I imagine you will have at the Infinity War screening. I don't say this to try and like to badmouth midnight screenings, of course not. It's just been my personal experience. I can only work with what I've been given, but I'm sure you'll have a great time, Dean, if the film is really good, and if not, you'll probably at least have a like worst case scenario, you'll have a fun time. And with Infinity War, you will have a packed house at midnight screening. I hope you've got your ticket. I hope you've booked it early. I hope you've been able to get a seat. I hope you've been able to go there with maybe a couple of friends who can share the fun with you. And if not, I'm sure you'll be surrounded by a big crowd who can do that. But with the release of Infinity War, what do I want to see from the MCU post Phase 4? I'm going to not mention any 20th Century Fox properties, because we do not know if that is going to be happening. It's kind of possible that it will. I think Comcast recently put in a counter bid to Disney, and at time of recording, Disney have yet to respond with a bigger offer, or maybe they have and I just have not seen that news. And also there's still some major paperwork, and there's still some major the government basically need to assess whether or not this is a legitimate or legal bid, whether or not Disney can acquire Fox, or if the monopoly will be too big. But so I'm not going to mention any X-Men or any Fantastic Four, but what I would like to see from the MCU post Phase 3 and Phase 4 would be, let's assume for the sake of this hypothetical that some members of the Avengers will die in Avengers 3 or Avengers 4. Like, for example, you could lose Iron Man, you could lose Scarlet Witch, you could lose a few other characters, you could lose Thor, you could lose Drax. Let's just say that we've lost a few people at the end of Infinity War or the end of Untitled Avengers Film 4, whatever. We'll go with that assumption. So what you have to do is, once you've gone for an Infinity War global, universal cosmic story, this giant warfare that's going to be happening across the galaxy, you've got to go small. You can't top that immediately. It's one thing I really liked about Iron Man 3 is that they didn't make it a world-ending story after the Chitauri invasion and Loki and the Battle of New York. They went for a much more intimate story. You've got to do that with Phase 4 for the majority of Phase 4. You've got to go for these smaller stories, and with these smaller stories with potentially smaller budgets, you can take some chances with the casting. You could have an Ironheart replacement. That could even be that could even be what's her name from Black Panther, the sister character, the scientist. She could be the replacement for Riri Williams in the comics, where she is Ironheart. She is this African American college student who takes up the Iron Man mantle essentially in her own way as Ironheart. You could have Amadeus Cho, I think that's his name, as the Asian Hulk. You could also have, I think, a must for Phase 4 is, even if it's just a cameo or a small supporting role, if she does not headline a film, Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel, because you're going to be having Captain Marvel played by Brie Larson. She's probably going to be in it for the long run, because you don't just introduce Brie Larson and then kill her off in Infinity War Part 2 or whatever that film's going to be. So maybe Kamala Khan is something more for Phase 5 or 6 if we are really looking forward to that far ahead into the future. But it's this time where you kind of take more creative risks, because the MCU is basically going to make $1 billion a year, minimum, or maybe $1.5 billion a year minimum, no matter what they release. Even some of the lowest grossing films they've had recently were, for example, Doctor Strange or Thor Ragnarok or Ant-Man. They still made at least $500 million, even maybe approaching $700 to $800 to $900 million. Let me just look at the let me just look at the releases, MCU releases. Just looking on Wikipedia right now, I'll try and find the box office figures. I really should have had this open in front of me before I asked her the question, but I'm in too deep, I apologise. Yeah, so with Ant-Man you made 519 million, with Doctor Strange 677, with Thor Ragnarok 854, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 863, and Spider-Man Homecoming 880, and Black Panther is 1.18 billion and rising. So yeah, and also with Black Panther it kind of proved that diversity works. There was the Marvel president or something, or one of the like Marvel representatives from the comic books, who was like, oh, we looked at the figures and it just seemed that Marvel readers didn't want diversity and they didn't want women in their comics, so we're stepping that back. He later retracted the statements because it was fucking nonsense and it didn't reflect the figures in any way, shape or form. Like I said, like you can easily just Google this stuff and know that he's completely talking out of his ass, and that the diversity has been the main thing keeping Marvel Comics around for the past 3 or 4 friggin' years. Yeah, so I think with Phase 4 or Phase 5, you kind of start future-proofing your universe. You know that Captain America, like Chris Evans, is not going to be here forever. Robert Downey Jr. is not going to be wanting to play Iron Man for the rest of his life, but he may still want regular royalty checks. And like, there's only so much that there's only so many protein shakes that Chris Pratt can have in his life. So you've got to start kind of ushering in these replacement people. Whether or not you do go for Jane Foster as Thor, or you have Falcon as Captain America, you can start doing these stories because you've had 10 years with these characters, and it's kind of now the time for experimentation, when you can start mixing up the mantles, when you can start bringing in new people. That's what I really want to see post Phase 3. Even if it's not like, if you want to introduce like some new heroes as well who could kind of be offshoots of the main people like Spider-Woman or She-Hulk, etc. Or if you want to give maybe War Machine or Iron Patriots their own bigger project, which will be interesting, is because Iron Patriot was also at one point Norman Osborn, and Spider-Man is now part of the MCU, so that storyline can happen. Or you have a Miles Morales Spider-Man who is like kind of pseudo confirmed for the MCU, because Donald Glover's character in Spider-Man Homecoming says, oh, I've got a cousin, I've got a nephew or something, and that's Miles Morales. That's what I want to see from the universe. I do want to see them not necessarily branch out and get bigger, and I don't want to see massive scale projects immediately after Infinity War. I want to see them go more character driven. I want to see them take chances with the lower budgets that a non-world ending catastrophe kind of implies. So that's what I want to see from the MCU going forward, and also just further diversity of voices, which has been like a massive success for them, with Taika Waititi for Thor Ragnarok or Ryan Coogler for Black Panther. I want to see more of that, yes please, for Phase 4. Okay folks, now that's the Patreon questions all sorted out for this week. We only got the 2, but I think we got a lot of mileage out of those 2. If you would like to contribute your own questions, then once again, you can become a patron of the Film Brits podcast. I massively appreciate your support, and also the money also goes towards funding my short film, which I massively appreciate. But it's now time for the lightning round, where I go to my Facebook, where about an hour or 2 ago, I put a post out asking people to submit questions, and then I spend up to 60 seconds answering the questions, and hopefully we're going to have a really, really fun time. So I've got a stopwatch on my phone. Let me just get the minute. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Harry Walker asks, what are your most anticipated movies for the rest of 2018? Off the top of my head, you've got Infinity War, Aquaman. I'm hoping James Wan pulls that out of the bag. I just saw a trailer today for Can You Ever Forgive Me, which is it's a Melissa McCarthy movie about, what's her name? It's about Lee Israel, who was someone who forged letters and documents from like artistic figures. That seems like a really interesting drama biopic as well. It's directed by Mariel Heller, so I really recommend you check that out, or at least check out the trailer. That should be really good. What else have we got? We've got I still have yet to see Wrinkle in Time. I want to see that soon. Pacific Rim Uprising comes out this week. Looking forward to that. I'm optimistic, even though I know it's not going to be as good as the first, but I'm still looking for a good time. So those ones really. I'm probably missing out some, but I only have 60 seconds, and these are off the top of my head, and time. Okay, next question. 3, 2, 1, go. Devon Tris and Langford says, not film related, but what are some of your favourite novels? I'm not the biggest reader of of fiction, but I love Misery by Stephen King. That's one of my favourite books. War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells is, in my opinion, the, like, not just book, but the best piece of fiction I've ever read. Just like in any medium, it's just an outstanding story. I love War of the Worlds. I do tend to read it at least once a year. It's completely my favourite book, War of the Worlds. I've also got some really generic picks, like I love reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens every year. That's a really great, it's relatively short as well, it's not that big a read, you can probably read it in a night or two. I love Christmas Carol. What else is there? But yeah, off the top of my head, those are some of my favourite books. I like reading Oliver Twist as well, so like it's completely not a unique list by any stretch of the imagination, but those are some of my favourite books. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Tom, I can't pronounce that last name, says, I know you like watching Robot Wars, but have you seen King of Bots for China? P.S. Fuck you, BBC, for cancelling Robot Wars. I've not seen King of Bots, no. I've watched like the American counterpart of Robot Wars. I forget what it is. I think it's Battle Bots or something. But yeah, and I know that the Razor team actually have a robot there, and it did an amazing trick where it actually spun from one end of the arena to the other on its disc and hit the opponent, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But yeah, the BBC cancelled Robot Wars this past week, which one, they should not have done. They just put it up against Blue Planet, so it was not going to be doing that great ratings-wise. Blue Planet was the most viewed thing of 2017, so it's kind of unfair to punish Robot Wars for that. But also, it does great by the license fee by getting the next generation into engineering, and I thought it was really entertaining, great as well. Also, I really fucking wanted to work on it this year. I wanted to work on it last year, but I couldn't because I was working on another job at the time and couldn't do it. And now I can't do it this year. Robot Wars was on my bucket list of things to work on, and now that's not going to happen. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Zach Hawkins says, with the finale trailers now out and nobody's still the wiser what the plot of the mess is, what are your folks' expectations for Ready Player One? I'm hearing it's a fun time, but I also know that people, the source material is massively problematic. I've not read the book, but I kind of want to believe in Spielberg. I liked the first trailer. The rest of it, I think, has kind of been all style and no substance, which maybe that... Hopefully the film is going to be subversive and endearing in some way, but outside of that first trailer, the rest of the marketing for Ready Player One has not grabbed me at all. And I'm meant to be the target demographic. I'm meant to be sort of the geek who loves the film and references from the 80s and 90s and everything that's going to be in this film. And only the first trailer was the one that really grabbed me. So it comes out in like a week in the UK, so I'm going to be able to check it out soon. I'll let you know what my thoughts are, but right now my expectations are pretty low to like kind of modest. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Mitchell Radford says, which character deaths in Infinity War do you think would best serve the story? Also, please watch and review Game of Thrones. I think those two questions are linked. You're like talking about character deaths in Game of Thrones, and now you want to talk about Infinity War. Death of Tony Stark might be fitting. I don't want Cap to die, because Cap is kind of the symbol of peace and justice and everything that's great in the world, and I don't want him to go right now, especially under this current political administration. We really need Captain America right now to punch Nazis. But I think what would best serve the story, I want to say Vision, but I want to see what they do with him going forward. He's kind of been underutilized, and they've done some really interesting stuff with him in the comics, and he's got that romance with Scarlet Witch. I hope he doesn't bite it. You're not getting rid of Black Panther. You don't want to get rid of Black Widow because you only have like 3 women in the MCU. You kind of can't do that. So maybe Hawkeye, Iron Man, maybe Thor as well. I think Thor might be due for a replacement at some point. Maybe Jane Foster. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Adam Faria says, sum up The World's End in 1 sentence. If not, sum up Baby Driver for me in 1 sentence. Random question, sum up The World's End in 1 sentence. Best of the Cornetto trilogy, smart, dramatic, incredibly witty screenplay. That is kind of my grammatically incorrect elongated sentence. I think it's the best screenplay Edgar Wright's ever written. It's an incredibly tight screenplay. I watched it last night on E4. This is probably what's motivated the question. But it's got such an incredible screenplay. The performances by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are amazing. I love Martin Freeman and Pierce Brosnan and Paddy Considine. The cast are amazing. The action's great as well. You can clearly tell that Edgar Wright has grown after Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. It's the best of the trilogy. I think Shaun of the Dead is my favourite and Hot Fuzz is the funniest, but World's End is my is the best, I think. And Baby Driver in 1 sentence. Really high adrenaline, high octane, fun time at the movies. I really enjoyed Baby Driver. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Thoughts on Black Panther and how it compares with the rest of the MCU? I really liked Black Panther a lot. Upon reflection, I think it's kind of on the same level as Wonder Woman, where it's got some pretty big issues with it, but the ends justify the means, and the whole is much better than the sum of its parts. Ryan Coogler absolutely showed up to play. The film is political as hell, and I'm of the belief that everything is political. So but with Black Panther especially, it's an incredibly politically and like radically charged movie. It is shown up with things on its mind, with things to say about black culture and Black Americana, and globalism and nationalism, and like Ryan Coogler did not mess around here, and I'm kind of amazed that Disney let him make the film this way. But it's really well put together. But there's a few issues. Like I'm not a fan of the first 10 minutes, and there's a few issues. Like I think it's also about 20 minutes too long, and there's like a subplot that's not necessary. But I still really like the film. Next question. Oh, I know the question is how it compares with the rest of the MCU. I'll just quickly say it's one of the better origin stories. But it's more. If I were to rank them, it would be kind of like just the top side of the middle, like half. If you go to my rankings, cut a line halfway through, Black Panther's maybe 2 or 3 up from there. I've not done a proper ranking, but that's kind of where I would place it, just anecdotally speaking. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. John Bridgewater says, what is your opinion on Rey's parents' reveal in The Last Jedi? Sorry if you don't want to talk about Star Wars. It was the only way they could have done it. It's so frustrating seeing people get annoyed at this reveal, because if you watch the first film, like The Force Awakens, that it's leading up to that. The reveal could not have been anything else when you actually look at what is said and what is done in The Force Awakens. You got Maz Kanata saying that your family, they're not coming back. You need to let go of this idea of them, and you need to look ahead of you. You need to look forward to Luke and to Han and to all these new friends. The Rey's parents could not have been previously established characters. They could not be important or interesting in the universe. And the fact that she thought she was special, that she thought she could have come from a great lineage, but she just comes from people who maybe sold her because they wanted drug or alcohol money or whatever. It's the not only the perfect reveal, but it's literally the only way it could have made sense. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Edward Sweet asks, which is the best series purely on the merits of the first 2 films, Alien or Terminator? Terminator, absolutely. Because I think Alien and Aliens are great, but Terminator and Terminator 2 are better than both of them. I think Terminator is better than Aliens, and Alien as well, and Terminator 2 is better than Terminator. I like the second and third act of Alien, basically when they get back on the spaceship after John Hurt has been attacked by the facehugger. That's when the film really starts for me. I know there's so much like mood and world building and atmosphere in the first act of Alien, but for me it's rough to watch on repeat viewings. First time it's captivating, but on repeat viewings that opening just does not grab me. It's not until the alien shows or the facehugger shows up on the ship that it really gets going. Whereas with Terminator, I'm invested like from the very first scene. I love the Terminator and Terminator 2, absolutely. Next question. I'm just going to take a quick swig of drink. I could edit around this, but I won't. Ooh, the lightning round kind of takes it out of me. Okay, ready. So put the lid back on. This makes great radio. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Connor James O'Donnell asks, what do you think of Illumination Entertainment being the ones helming the Super Mario movie? Financially, it makes so much sense. Like, Illumination have a track record of making films relatively cheap. Like, their animation films only cost like 60 to 70 million, which is really low when it comes to 3D animated films. And they make so much money. Creatively, though, Illumination Entertainment are the safest and dullest choice of production company they could have gone with. Like, Minions and Sing and Despicable Me 3 are completely... They're vanilla. They're completely middle of the road. Forget about it the moment you see it films. Like, Sing was better than I thought it would be, but it still wasn't particularly good. and you see their trailer for The Grinch Stole Christmas. It's essentially the trailer for Despicable Me 1. Just replace the Grinch with Gru, and you've got the trailer for Despicable Me. This company clearly only has like one plot line they can think of, and now they're just applying it to the Grinch. It's just, no, you like, get Leica to do Super Mario, for crying out loud. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Carl Lane asks, what is the most atmospheric game you've ever played? For me, it would be LA Noire so far. That's an interesting game when you think of an atmospheric game. When you think of atmosphere, I think of something. I'm playing Resident Evil 4 at the moment. And that, like, because I've just installed the Nintendo Wii in my office, and I've got Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition. It's amazing. I bloody love it. I've played it and beaten it many times, but I'm going through it again. And that is an atmospheric game. I love, especially when it's nighttime and it's raining and lightning, and you can only really see around you when the lightning strikes. And oh shit, there's a Spanish zombie in front of you. But when you say LA Noire for atmosphere, that's a really great choice, because it's not like horror atmosphere. It's the atmosphere of LA. It's the atmosphere of the city, of the genre of crime, of underground back alley deals, and the police scenario. That's a really great choice, Kyle. That's really good. But as for my most atmospheric game, I'll have to think on that, but I love your choice. I think that's a great use of the term atmospheric. I've gone over my minutes, but Kyle, that's high five for you. Next question, Graham Williamson asks, favourite New Who master moment? New Who, it's got to be his reveal in Utopia. I think John Sim did really well with what he was given, and Michelle Gomez's performance is what makes that character even the slightest bit tolerable. But it's the Derek Jacobi reveal when he's talking to Martha about time travel and how he was like abandoned and lost, and then he brings out this fob watch, and you recognise it from Human Nature and the Family of Blood, and everything from that moment to the end of Utopia when he regenerates into John Sim is TV magic. Derek Jacobi is outstanding in that, right? He opens the watch and then he turns around to Chantho, and that look he gives, and that whole segment of Utopia is amazing television. That is my New Who master moment. Maybe it's probably the best master moment ever in my opinion, not just New Who. But yeah, Derek Jacobi's reveal, no question. Okay, next question from David Banks, who says, "What is your what is your first film memory?" Interesting one. I think it was probably Toy Story. Going to see Toy Story at the cinema. It was 1995. Yeah, I think it was 1995. Just googling that now. Can't say. Yeah, no, 1996. March 1996. So I would have been I would have been nearly 4 years old when I saw it. So yeah, maybe a more appropriate age to go to a movie. Yeah, I think that was my first movie memory. I don't remember much from it. I don't really have many memories of my life before I turned like 6 or 7 years old, but I kind of maybe remember going to see Toy Story. I've been told that I was taken to go see The Lion King when that came out in October 1994, but I don't remember that at all. But according to my mum, she said that as a family we went to go and see Disney's The Lion King, and I was there as well. So, but I think that was the first time I ever went. But my first film memory is Toy Story. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Luke Jenkins asks, favourite Doctor Who cliffhanger? There's loads to pick from. I love the Parting of the Ways Bad Wolf cliffhanger, because that's so subversive. That is a cliffhanger for the Daleks, and even though the Doctor has no plan or no weapons worth a damn, we know that he's going to save the day because the Doctor promised that he would. I love that cliffhanger. I can't remember the story. Was it the Image of Fendel? I can't remember what it was. It's a Tom Baker story when him and I think it's Leela or Sarah Jane, I can't remember which one, but they go around a corner and then Tom Baker's Doctor is like, no, stop, look, and then there's a shot of the floor and it's just like a checkered floor pattern, and then the credits roll, and that's the cliffhanger. It's probably one of the worst cliffhangers, but it's really fun. Also the one and the Dragonfire, when the Doctor just needs a cliffhanger to happen, so he literally hangs from a cliff. But my favourite cliffhanger is probably the Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways one. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Theo Cheris Telfer says, worst season of New Who? Probably, I want to say season 8. Yeah, I think season 8 is maybe the worst one. That was Peter Capaldi's first series. I need like a refresher course on like the whole Peter Capaldi era. I'm kind of forget. Actually, it might have been series 9. I'm going to go over my minute for this one because I want to give like at least an accurate answer for this one. So I'm 30 seconds in now, but let me just look at the stories. And this, okay, no, season 8 is not the worst. Yeah, maybe season 9. Because yeah, it starts off weak with the Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar. Then it gets really good and really interesting all of a sudden with Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Then you've got like The Girl Who Died, The Woman Who Lived, Zygon Inversion, Sleep No More, Face the Raven. You've got like a really long list of just okay to meh to alright stories, and it's just. And then all of a sudden you get this massive peak with Heaven Sent, and then it just plummets back down with Hellbent, and bookending it to Last Christmas and Husbands of River Song, which are just some of the weaker Christmas specials, I think. Actually, I need to revisit Husbands of River Song. I think it's okay. I can't remember. But with Series 10, I've gone over my minute by quite a bit, but with Series 10, if you replace the Monk trilogy with something that actually is interesting, you might have a better series there, but maybe Series 9 and Series 10 are the weakest. It used to be Series 2, but even in Series 2, you've still got great stories like School Reunion and Tooth and Claw and Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, and like you've got some really great stories there. And it's only really Fear Her and New Earth and Love and Monsters that really drag it down, but the rest of it kind of makes up for it. So before Peter Capaldi came in, it was Series 2, but now it's either Series 9 or Series 10. Probably Series 9. I think, off the top of my head, I would need to revisit those, and hopefully I will in depth with my future reviews. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Jonathan Mullen asks, least favourite to favourite Thor movie? Least favourite? Probably... it's tough because I need to revisit Thor the Dark World, but I remember really liking it. I really liked Thor the Dark World. At the time, I liked it better than the first Thor, but people are always like saying it's the worst one and really dragging it down, so I'm just wondering whether or not I was maybe caught up in the hype with it too much and I'm maybe giving it too much credit. But if we go for like, the last time I saw it, I'm going from least to favourite. It is probably Thor from least, middle Thor the Dark World, and then favourite is Thor Ragnarok. I think Thor Ragnarok is a really great fun time. It's completely different in tone to Thor the Dark World, or as many people call it, Thor the Second Thor. But it feels like the most well balanced, and I love what Kenneth Branagh did for the first Thor, but it's not aged that well because it is sort of like a more generic MCU origin type movie, but it still has some really great redeeming qualities. Next question, Joseph Hudson asks, if you could pick one character from another franchise as a Doctor Who companion, who would you pick? I think someone like Ripley from Alien, because she ain't going to take no shit from any Dalek or anybody. That she would be maybe a fun companion, because if you want a movie, a companion from a different franchise or a different movie or whatever, you want someone who knows what they're doing. So maybe a Sarah Connor or a Ripley or someone else, or maybe Rinko Kikuchi from Pacific Rim, who kind of knows their head around some certain sci-fi concepts. That would be, yeah, we'll go for one of those three. That's my pick. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Joel Newton says, I saw in the earlier post how you still haven't seen Class. Have you seen it since then, and if so, what did you think of it? I personally liked it at first, but it has since failed the test of time, and the fact it will forever remain unfinished, plus the fact that it has very little in common with Doctor Who, hampers it. I'm afraid, Joel, I have not seen Class at all. I've not watched a single frame of Class at all. The most involvement I've ever had with Class was making that 5 Who Fans Class premiere video, and it is one of the most fun shoots I've ever done, and one of the things I'm personally most proud of. I loved that shoot. Check out that video. I'll find out what to search for you guys. So if you put 5 Who Fans Class, is that it? Okay, yeah, so if you search 5 Who Fans, all one word, and Class, Class premiere, we made it over a year ago. I am the cameraman and like the documentary filmmaker in that. It was such a great fun shoot. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Nathan Snyder asks, should pure historicals come back in Doctor Who? Yes, absolutely they should. I don't know entirely, I can't exactly pinpoint the moment where they went away. I think it might have been like prior to the Peter Davison era, because you've got the Visitation, which is like the Great Fire of London, but there is still like an alien and robotic influence and everything. But I'm trying to think, when was the last pure historical Doctor Who story? But yeah, they absolutely should. They should be a storyline when they go back and meet a famous celebrity, or there is maybe a myth or like something that's more supernatural as opposed to completely sci-fi. Yeah, they absolutely should. I hope that we get more in at least one of those in Series 11. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. David Strachan asks, have you ever seen the trailer for the upcoming Mortal Engines movie? I'd never heard of the book series by Philip Reeve until after watching the trailer. What are your thoughts, bearing in mind Peter Jackson and his team are the ones who bring the story to life? Yeah, Mortal Engines is... I really liked the first trailer. I like the premise of it as well, when you've got these giant vehicles which carry entire countries on their back. It is brought to us from... like Peter Jackson is a producer on it, but he's not directing. It's directed by Christian Rivers, who I think is making one of his debut... his directorial debut. He's been a unit director on the Hobbit films and on the Lord, and he was a visual effects supervisor on the Lord of the Rings films. He was also a second AD on Pete's Dragon, and he's directing a Dam Busters remake apparently, also being directed by Peter Jackson. But yeah, with Peter Jackson's influence and with Weta and with the backing of Universal, this could be really fun. I like the premise, and hopefully we get something like an engaging post-apocalyptic steampunk type of film. My expectations are pretty high for it. I think it should be really good. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Marco Portuando says, out of 5 stars, how would you rate all the Spider-Man movies and why? Okay, Spider-Man 1, 4 stars. It has some cheesy elements, but it's just a perfect amalgamation of like the Silver Age of comics. Spider-Man 2, 5 stars. That is one of the best comic book movies ever. I can't praise it enough. Spider-Man 3, maybe 2.5 to 3 stars. It's got some really good redeeming elements. The production values are off the charts good. There's some really great sequences and scenes. I actually like Dancing Peter, and I think it fits the narrative really well. And yeah, and Eddie Brock, that storyline's not particularly great, but I like the Sandman. The Sandman like origin sequence is worth the price of admission alone. Amazing Spider-Man 1 at 1.5 stars. That's just no good. It's basically Twilight but Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is like 0 stars. That's just one of the worst comic book movies ever made. And Spider-Man Homecoming, about 3 stars. It is okay. It is the perfectly decent, average, mediocre Spider-Man. Okay, so next question. 3, 2, 1. There are so many questions here. 3, 2, 1, go. Taylor Christiana says, do you hate Series 4 of Sherlock as much as I do, which is the Fire and Fury of a Thousand Suns? I like the Mark Gatiss penned episode of Toby Jones. I think that's a high point, but even when compared to like some of the best of Series 1 and 2, it falls notably short. It's slightly better than, say, The Blind Banker, but it's not as good as the rest of those stories. I know there's been like a big Sherlock backlash. Like H-Bomber Guy's video on Sherlock is absolutely brilliant. I love that video. I love him as a creator as well. I love him very much, and I wish to make the hooks with him. But for I agree with everything he says post Series 2. I love Series 1 and 2, but I acknowledge there are major issues. But Series 3 and 4, yeah, that's a massive downturn. Particularly the villain of Series 3 and there are no stakes to Series 3 when you actually think about it. And Series 4, yeah, the middle episode is good, the rest are just kind of pants and just no good. That series has kind of whimpered into like dying. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Alex Rooney says, do you think Killmonger is the best MCU villain? If so, why? Minus spoilers for Black Panther, skip ahead about 50 seconds. Yeah, I think he's one of the best. He's definitely up there with Loki and Ultron, who I think are some like the best villains. We had some really good villains recently. I love Ego, I love Vulture, and who was the villain in... Yeah, and Hela. Hela was just an awesome fun villain for the sake of being a fun villain, which is kind of how you need to approach that character, I think. But Killmonger, he kind of leans into the like righteous indignation of that film about its political leanings, about how he'd rather die a free man than be in chains. And like his final line is just, it's so like it hits you like a ton of bricks, that final line. And his motives are completely reasonable. Like his actions are kind of deplorable, and he's not a good guy. His nickname is Killmonger, but you completely get his rationale. I think he needed to be in the movie a bit more. He's kind of absent for about half of it, but yeah, I think he's a terrific villain, and Michael B. Jordan is outstanding. Okay, I have two questions left. Hopefully my voice doesn't give out. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. David Gilmer says, favorite band episode of a TV show? I don't really know that many. There was the Wish Upon a Weinstein episode for Family Guy, which was pretty fun. That was a funny episode. Outside of that, I can't really think of any. I want to try and give this one the 4 minutes, but band TV episodes. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, there's the Pokemon episode where it gave like half the kids in Japan like an epileptic fit. Okay, there's a link where it's from Cinema Blend, and I'd rather not. Let's have a look. There was a Beavis and Butthead episode. There's also that South Park episode where Comedy Central essentially censored like the last 5 minutes of it. I'm not finding any ones that I would know about. No, I'm afraid I don't really have anything to contribute to that one, I'm afraid. Just looking. I may need to check out this list later. Well, this list from Screen Rant, it actually does have the 200 to 201 Cartoon Wars. Oh no, actually. Yeah, because of the they put the Muslim prophet Muhammad in the episode and it had to be censored. Yeah, so I kind of got that one. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't really know that many apart from the Family Guy and South Park ones. Next question, 3, 2, 1, go. Harvey D. Cotton Jr. says, what is the split between art and science in film and television production? With so many technical constraints, how much latitude is there for artistic expression? This question not only needs more than a minute, but maybe it's because I'm getting tired, but I would like a bit more elaboration. What is the split between art and science in film and television production? Because when you say art and science and then split it up to everything else, I don't personally know what the split is. With so many technical constraints, how much last? I don't want. Maybe, this could be me being completely dumb, but with so many technical constraints, how much latitude is there for artistic expression? I don't see what that has to do with the art and science aspect of the question. But split between arts, I know that, but to try and get some sort of an answer out there, I'll turn the timer off because I've spent like 50 seconds trying to figure out the question, which is probably my fault more than anything. But the split between art and science, there's a lot of people who kind of just fall into the industry without. This may not be the answer or like the question. This may not relate to the question, but I'll try and get something. There's a lot of people in the industry who did not start off in TV and film and just sort of fell into it because it met with their particular skill sets. Like you'll get people who work as, say, for example, they work as an electrician. They'll fix lighting fixtures and fix like bulbs and electronic sockets and everything. They will already have more or less the qualifications to be, say, a grip or a lighting or someone who, like in charge of lighting on a film set. So they can always fall into that. I personally don't know. From projects that I've worked on and been a part of, I don't know exactly what the split is, whether or not people did actually study TV and film and then did it later. Because one good thing about the TV industry, at least from the way I'm approaching it, is like, for example, I started off as a runner and kind of working my way up, is that you don't, strictly speaking, need any qualifications. Really, you just need common sense and a good head on your shoulders. So I don't really know why I've been hired for anything at all. But you don't need any qualifications or any formal training. You just need to be able to you need to be able to be in a work environment like that and still manage to stay afloat. That is kind of the main qualification you need. So I've not really personally asked many people, oh, did you study film and then you fell into it? A lot of people did, and a lot of people I imagine didn't. So I don't exactly know what the split is, but hopefully that kind of answers your question. I'll actually put a reply. I'll take this debate further onto the Facebook post, and Harvey, I'll look out for a reply that I may type at the moment. Can you? I'll type it now, and you folks can listen. Can you please elaborate on the question? Maybe I'm misreading the question, but what does the technical constraints have to do with the art and science aspect? So Harvey, look out for that, and then I'll be taking this topic further on the Facebook page, the Mr. TARDIS Reviews Facebook page. I put a post recording an episode of Film Brits tonight to get your lightning round questions in. If you do want to learn more about that question, this is kind of more, this is kind of like the Sherlock Series 4 of podcasts, where I think we had some good elements in this podcast, but by the end we kind of whimpered and petered out at the end. So I apologise for that. I just wanted to make sure that all the lightning round questions get at least some sort of answer, or like give them the time of day in some way, even if I have no interesting answer like that cancelled TV one. So this is one of the longer podcasts I've done recently. We've gone like an hour and 20 minutes recording. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you listen on iTunes, please rate and subscribe onto your podcast feeds. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button and spread it around, and comment on anything you'd like to anything you'd like to add to the discussion. I will be watching and I will be reading the comments. And also, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can go onto patreon.com/Trilbee. Massively appreciate your support and keeping the lights on here. And folks, before my voice gives out, I'll see you all next time.